Hey folks, it's the Red, and welcome to another Red-Trospective review. It's time for my review of Mighty No. 9 to coincide with the blind run that I had just completed, and if you hadn't already seen that, well then you can click here to watch that if you'd like. Otherwise, let's get right to it. Certainly, this game has seen more than its fair share of negative press and reviews across the internet, largely around the controversies of this game's development and release. But I prefer to be optimistic when it comes to things like this, so let's have a look at this game fair and objectively, and who knows, maybe we'll find that the game isn't as bad as people say it is. For the uninitiated, Mighty No. 9 was designed to be the spiritual successor to Mega Man, Keiji Inafune's star franchise. How well does it hold up? Well, let's find out. Essentially, this is how the story plays out. It is the futuristic year of the present day. Okay. The programming in robots has gone haywire and they're all turning evil throughout the city. You are Beck, a good robot that wasn't affected somehow. Now you have to go and stop them. Yeah, the writing in this game can be a little weird at times and feels a bit contrived at points. And by the end of the game, asks more questions than answers than anything else, which really probably aren't going to get answers unless another game or two is released. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about the plot, simply because it doesn't seem like they spent a lot of time coming up with it, but as far as a Mega Man-style game is concerned, it seems to get the job done. I don't think Mega Man games need to have deep, engaging plots in order to be good games. No, it's all about gameplay, so let's see how the rest of the game fares. Now, the way I see it, this game suffers from three major problems. And this first one, I think we can all pretty well agree on, is the presentation. For a game that was released in 2016, the graphics are pretty, shall we say, lacking. Besides the fact that a lot of the graphics seem pretty outdated, there are even other parts that don't look like they fit with what they were going for style-wise. There's a reason I was making fun of the pizza explosions, after all. As for the character models, well, I'm afraid those don't fare much better. Most of the character designs are decent at least, some are pretty good, others not so much. But the models themselves look like they came from a PlayStation 2 game, and the animations seem pretty reminiscent of a PlayStation 1 game. Somehow I don't think they were going for either of those. Speaking of animation, I can't say I was terribly impressed by what I saw in this game. From Beck's elegant running animation to the choppy turrets in Avi's stage. Seriously, why do they look like this? There's no reason for it! And it's not just the animation itself that's a problem, but also the lack of animation. Characters in cutscenes are way too stiff, and their mouths don't move. This is almost as bad as the cutscenes from Sonic Generations for 3DS. Actually, I think those may have been a little better. I mean, if they were going to go this route, I think it may have been better if they had like a large static image to go next to the text box of the person talking. At least then they would look a little more expressive. And there's plenty of games out there that do just that, so there's no reason not to. So yeah, even though there are some good character designs here and there, this game could and should look a lot better than it does. Next major problem, music and sound. Really, I can't speak favorably for the music of this game because I can't remember hardly any of the tracks from this game. In fact, probably the most memorable track in this game occurs during the end credits. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
The most unlikely to succeed, lacking the power and speed he's probably gonna need. Once the weakest link of the family, now he's the final hope of humanity. In everyone's life there comes a time, and it seems this one is mine. My talents were undermined, now I'm the one, Mighty No. 9.
Yeah, I know, it's got cheese written all over it, but you know what? I still found it catchy and fun in a way. So, yeah, that was probably the best track in the game. Which is kind of disappointing, really, because Mega Man games are always known for having some of the best soundtracks in video games. So for this game to have such a lackluster soundtrack is just plain disheartening. Sound effects seem alright all in all, blasting enemies is pretty satisfying, everything sounds like it should. And the character voices seem to get the job done pretty decently as well. Now, this is one area where I might not see eye to eye with a lot of people who have played this game. Many have gone on to say that the voice acting in this game is among the worst they've ever heard. I wouldn't be so inclined to agree. After all, if you've been playing Mega Man games as much as I have, you know what bad voice acting looks like.
Hey, Bass! Why must I fight you? We are not enemies!
We may be able to locate another energy emission from the radar room. When we find that meteor, we'll find Dr. Wily.
What if I become one of the Mavericks? Zero, if I become a Maverick, you have to take care of me.
Why must Reploids fight one another? I've had enough violence.
Ah! What am I fighting for?
Now, I'm not saying Mighty Number 9's voice acting is perfect by any means. Certainly it could be better, but I think everybody sounds pretty much how I would expect them to. I don't think the problem is the actors themselves, but rather how their characters are being written. Some of the Mighty Numbers in this game feel a bit stereotypical. Pyro is the psychotic fire starter, Battalion is the war-bound drill sergeant, and so on and so forth. But then we have Dr. Sonda, whose voice actor is kind of a ham.
Sacre bleu! What happened to the lights? I'm scared. Mommy!
Dial it back, dude. Dial it back. And the third issue with this game brings us to the meat and potatoes of this review, the gameplay. As I described before, this game is trying to be a spiritual successor to Mega Man, so staying true to its style, most of the gameplay entails running, jumping, and shooting at robots that you see along the way. But with a twist! Once you've shot an enemy enough times, they'll start flashing with this particle effect around them. That's when you're supposed to dash into them and absorb their power. These powers entail minor buffs to your character for a short period of time. Much of the gameplay seems to be centered around this new scoring system, which entails accumulating combos by dashing into enemies the moment they start flashing for a 100% combo chain. But dashing into enemies is not really something that ever really sat well with me throughout this game. Personally, I would rather just shoot down the enemy and be done with it. Technically, you could do that, but it would take entirely too long, and it's more practical to try and dash into them after they get to the flashing point. But really, combos are only important for accumulating high scores, and really, who plays games for score anymore? Right? The other thing I don't really like in the gameplay is the special weapon system. Normally, in a Mega Man style game, you could just pause the game and pick out the weapon that you want to use, and then unpause and return to the action with the power already equipped. You don't get this convenience in Mighty Number 9, you have to use the shoulder buttons to pick out the weapon that you want to use. And even that seems to be a bit unintuitive. Once again, in Mega Man, if you press L and R, you will switch to that weapon and it will be already equipped and ready to use. In Mighty Number 9, you use two shoulder buttons to toggle your weapon up and down, and then you press another button to actually activate it. You can then press it again to switch back to your normal blaster. I remind you that this is the only way to change your special weapon during gameplay, and if you're in the heat of a battle, this will make cycling through your weapons much too difficult, and frankly, you'd be better off just sticking with the regular blaster. I didn't find many of the special weapons to be all that impressive anyway, so yeah, I think you would be better off sticking with the blaster. It's more reliable. Although I do appreciate that special weapons can now automatically charge over time. As for everything else, well, the game pretty much plays like a Mega Man game, so if you've played Mega Man before, you know what you're expecting when you come in here. Challenging levels that test your running and gunning skills, and the bosses are just as fun to fight as ever. But as always, they're hard as nails to beat, so you better bring your A game when it comes time to fight one. I hear a lot of people saying that the level design in this game isn't very good either, and that the levels are very bland and uninspired. I only somewhat agree with this, though. Many of the enemy robots that you face in this game are pretty generic looking and probably designed to be able to fit into any level that they want to use them in. But there are a few thematic enemies here and there, just not a whole lot of them. Some have even gone as far as to compare this game to the likes of Mega Man X6 in terms of how badly designed it is. I'm sorry, but no, Mega Man X6 is on a whole other level of bad game design. Mighty Number 9 doesn't have you doing things like blindly jumping at spike pits that you can't see coming. And it also doesn't have you running around in a stage with very limited view space. It's borderline unfair what they put you through in X6, and I don't think Mighty No. 9 even comes close to this. As for the levels themselves, well, I do kind of wish they would have done more to make them seem less like just hallways full of robots in them. Stuff like dashing through waves of falling fireballs or running away from a giant drill tank that will instant kill you, that's all well and good, but there's not enough moments like this. Unfortunately, much of the game is just running through various hallways and shooting at any robots you see. There is very little variety to be offered in this game. It's missing a lot of the things that make Mega Man games so great. The disappearing blocks, the thematic enemies, the weird contraptions that you have to figure out in order to progress through the level. There is so much gameplay potential here, but it seems to be all focused on this dashing and comboing mechanic. It tries so hard to be like Mega Man, and yet it doesn't seem to understand what makes Mega Man games so great to begin with. But at the end of the day, it still retains the run-and-gun gameplay that I like in Mega Man games, so I still got some level of enjoyment out of this. I just don't feel like I got as much out of it as I could have. All in all, it was just kinda disappointing, and in the end, that pretty much just describes the whole game. It's one big disappointment. Especially when you stop and consider what this game was supposed to be. After years of more or less the fans being ignored by Capcom and not releasing any new Mega Man content, Mega Man's creator Keiji Inafune starts a Kickstarter for a brand new project promising the revitalization of Mega Man in a new IP. It was supposed to be this big Kickstarter success story about how you, the gamer, can help bring the greatest of gaming projects to life. Instead, what we got was a half-baked, half-hearted attempt to cash in on a well-known franchise. Another thing people like to point out is that this game raised $4 million in its Kickstarter and had 3 years of development time. One could use that as grounds to say that this game shouldn't look or play as badly as it does, but I'm not so sure the extra money or development time really meant that the game was going to look or play any better. I think actually they had a plan in place for how the game was going to look, and they weren't going to deviate from that regardless of how much money they raised. Remember that the original funding goal was $900,000. That's all they had planned to put into the game. But really, even with $900,000, I think the game should look better than it does. After all, I have seen other Kickstarter games that had raised less money and looked better than this. It's a common belief that because the game raised $4 million that it should look better than if it had only raised $900,000, but the thing is, the extra money was also supposed to go towards these stretch goals that they had set up. A more visually appealing game would have been nice, but I don't think that was ever on the table. I think they had a set plan for how the game was going to look and saw it through. And so we finally come to the end of the review, and overall, I can't really give this game better than a middle-of-the-road 5 out of 10. I can only really recommend this game to Mega Man fans or the particularly curious. And even then, I would probably wait until it's on sale, and definitely do not get the Wii U version. The load times are atrocious there. If you're gonna get this game, get it on PC. And if you're new to the genre and are curious about how Mega Man games are like, well, I would not recommend trying this as your first game. I would recommend literally any Mega Man game from that series. Even though I got a pretty fair amount of enjoyment out of this game and will probably be coming back to it at some point, that's probably not how this game is going to be remembered. It's probably going to be the most disappointing game in 2016. And really, I can't blame anyone for feeling that way. But on the bright side, at least we got a pretty cheesy rap out of it.
20XX, we living in the future now. Getting by a little better than we used to now. But it ain't all good, cause my hood's in a panic, so the government suggested robotic enhancements. It's to level the playing field, but they ain't playing fair, so they be forced to yield. Dr. White made 9 siblings, called the mighty numbers to boost competition. Always in the top ranks, they weren't dangerous, they probably shot blanks. But one day there was a...
Oh yeah, there's also NES-era English in this game too. Good job, guys!